The first thing he noticed was the silence, the kind that presses against the chest and makes old memories rise without permission. As he stood at the gate of the orphanage, holding a donation check that suddenly felt too light for the weight in his hands. He had come to give, to do something good and leave quietly. But the moment he stepped inside, a strange pull guided his eyes across the courtyard, past faded swings and cracked benches, until they landed on a small girl sitting alone beneath a tree, clutching a worn-out toy as if it were the only thing anchoring her to the world. Something about her posture, the tilt of her head, the guarded sadness in her eyes, struck him with a force he could not explain. And in that instant, the purpose of his visit began to unravel into something far more personal and life-altering. Before the story pulls you deeper, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Brightly Kindness if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet power of doing good when no one is watching. He was a man who had built his life on control, on careful decisions and forward motion, believing that the past was something you survived and then left behind. Success had followed him, not loudly but steadily, and with it came a sense of responsibility that pushed him toward acts of charity rather than connection. Donating to the orphanage had seemed simple, almost transactional, a way to honor a promise he once made to himself after losing someone he loved. But as he walked through the halls, listening to the soft echoes of children's footsteps and laughter mixed with loneliness, something inside him began to crack. The walls were lined with drawings of families, some detailed, some barely formed, all reaching toward an idea of belonging, and with each step he felt a growing unease, as if he were walking toward a truth that had been waiting patiently for years. The girl under the tree remained in his thoughts even after he completed the formalities of his donation. He learned, almost accidentally, that she rarely spoke, that she arrived years ago with no clear history, and a look in her eyes far older than her age. The caretaker mentioned her name in passing, and it struck him like a whisper from a life he once lived and tried to forget. Memories surged forward, of a time when love had been reckless and hope had been fragile, when choices were made under pressure and consequences were postponed with the dangerous assumption that there would always be time to fix things later. He had walked away from a relationship believing it was the lesser pain, never imagining that life could continue without him in ways he would never see. Days passed, but the image of the child sitting alone refused to fade. He found himself returning to the orphanage, at first under the pretense of follow-up support, then simply because his feet carried him there without his permission. Each visit revealed more, not through conversation but through observation. He noticed how she watched other children being picked up, how she stiffened at sudden movements, how she held that toy with the intensity of someone guarding a fragile promise. In her expressions, he saw reflections of his own childhood fears, the same guarded hope he once carried when adults failed to show up. The realization did not arrive gently. It came late one evening as he sat alone, reviewing old documents and memories he had sealed away. Dates aligned in cruel clarity, and a truth he had avoided for years stood fully formed before him. The orphanage was not just a place of charity anymore. It was the keeper of his deepest regret. The daughter he never knew existed was not a symbol of guilt or loss but a living, breathing child who had learned to survive without him. The weight of that knowledge pressed down on him, reshaping his understanding of responsibility and love in ways no success ever had. What followed was not a clean redemption but a struggle filled with doubt and fear. He questioned his right to step into her life, wondering whether his presence would heal or harm, whether a man who had missed so much could ever be more than a stranger. The orphanage staff spoke of patience, of trust built slowly, and he listened, humbled by the reality that love could not be rushed or demanded. He showed up consistently, not with grand gestures but with quiet presence, learning to sit in silence, to let her set the pace, to accept that forgiveness, if it came, would be earned one moment at a time. Gradually, the atmosphere around her began to change. The girl who once sat alone started to linger closer when he visited, her guarded eyes softening just enough to suggest curiosity. The toy was still clutched tightly, but her shoulders relaxed, and in those subtle shifts, he saw hope taking root. The orphanage no longer felt like a place of endings but of beginnings, where broken timelines could be gently rewoven into something whole. The true transformation, however, was not only hers. As he confronted his past honestly for the first time, he discovered that redemption is less about erasing mistakes and more about choosing differently when given another chance. He redefined success, understanding that the most meaningful legacy is not built in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in the lives we show up for, especially when it is uncomfortable or frightening. Near the end of this journey, when the future still felt uncertain but filled with possibility, his visits became something both of them relied on. The orphanage staff noticed the change, the way the girl's laughter began to appear, hesitant but real, the way her drawings shifted from solitary figures to scenes that hinted at connection. Healing did not arrive all at once, but it came steadily, carried by patience, accountability, and a love that finally chose to stay. If this story has touched your heart even a little, please like, share, and engage with this video to help spread stories that remind